You've probably never heard of Schneps Media, but if you live in any of the 5 boroughs of New York, you've probably encountered its content. Started as a single Queens newspaper in 1985, the company gradually bought up community news outlets all across New York, and it's since expanded into Philadelphia and even Palm Beach, Florida. It not only targets audiences by locale, but also ethnicity. And most of its news is completely free to read. How has the company continued to grow despite so many headwinds in local news? To answer this question, I spoke to CEO Josh Schneps. He told the story of how his mother launched that first Queens newspaper and explained why businesses continue to advertise with him despite having plenty of other options. Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, let's jump into the interview. Hey Josh, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Simon. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So the favorite my favorite interviews that I have for the podcast are with these media moguls that I've never heard of, and I think you definitely kind of fit that bill, and that you run this company with enormous reach and influence. In fact, I think you could be argued that you reach more New Yorkers than even the New York Times, and yet obviously you're not like a huge household name in media circles. You don't get covered in like a bunch of the big like kind of trade and meet by like media reporters and stuff like that. So yeah, it's super excited to have this conversation. So tell me about the genesis of your company. It started with your mom, right?
Well, first of all, thank you for calling me a media mogul. I don't know about that, but we're very fortunate to serve the greatest city in the world, New York City. We serve Long Island and other markets as well that I'm sure we'll get into. But not only is it a huge city, but it's tremendously diverse. So, it's a real privilege to be able to serve such a great, group of communities that we have here. And it's really an amazing story, our story. My mom started a newspaper in our living room when I was 7 in 1985 was the first issue. But the story goes back to my oldest sister, who was 11 years older than I am, and she was born mentally handicapped at birth. And my parents were in their early 20s, had no idea what to do. Um, she would grow up to really still have, to be treated or cared for as like a baby, meaning she couldn't walk, she couldn't talk. But at that time, they had recommended that they bring her to an institution called Willowbrook. Willowbrook was a relatively new institution built on Staten Island, which is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. When the parents went there to visit the children, they would bring the children out, so the parents never saw what was happening inside the institution. And at that time, Governor Rockefeller was the governor of the state of New York, and he had cut the budgets. And it caused a lot of problems as far as the number of people that were caring for the children at Willowbrook. And my mother literally started picketing. And she's such an energetic and vivacious person that she was getting carloads of moms from where she lived in Queens to go to Willowbrook every day and to protest these cuts. And a young reporter at that time by the name of Geraldo Rivera got the keys and got inside the institution and broadcast on television nationally. And we know what broadcast television was back in the day. It reached, a tremendous number of people, but really showed horrible conditions at the institution where there were children like on the floor, like in their own feces. And it was really horrific. And there was tremendous change. My father was an attorney. He filed a class action lawsuit, and that lawsuit resulted in closing of the institution. It's now the College of Staten Island, part of the CUNY system in New York. And it brought money into day programs and group homes where people had more individual care. And that model is now across the country. And my mom started a nonprofit that still is really going strong today called Life's Work that operates group homes across the region. But the biggest lesson that my mom learned is here I was marching and picketing and no one was listening. And all of a sudden, Geraldo came and showed people what was happening, and change happened quickly from there on. And she was a school teacher. She worked for an elected official. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to start a local paper because of what happened here, that I can make a difference in my community and be really civically minded. And it really started there. So it's really a terrific story that my mom has. and the roots of, how our organization grew.
And where in New York did your family live?
So
Yeah.
Queens, New York. I ended up, started in Queens and then moved to Long Island.
And then she started this newspaper in Queens.
Yeah, it was a local community newspaper serving a few neighborhoods in Queens, because Queens is really massive. For people that don't
Mhm.
know, it's one of the five boroughs of New York City. Today, it has a population of close to 2.5 million. So, you look at that borough, it has a larger population than many metropolitan cities across the country.
Larger population in some states.
Yeah.
So she started this newspaper. Was it a weekly, a daily?
It was a weekly community local newspaper, and it served, what are the communities of Whitestone, College Point, Bayside, Douglaston, Little Neck, which is the northeast portion of the borough.
And was it like a free newsletter or newspaper, I mean?
It was a free local paper, yes. And believe it
Uh-huh.
or not, back then, that one borough may have had two or three other, four other weekly community newspapers.
And
So
was it just like her to begin with, like writing the articles and stuff,
she
or did she hire staff?
partnered with a professional journalist that had worked at the New York Daily News. So she had a partner in the beginning. He was kind of the editor, and she was, taking pictures, selling ads, doing whatever had to be done. And then, he was very much into politics. She was very much into civic-minded work, and she ended up buying him out after a couple of years.
And was it mainly Queens businesses buying the ads, or was it like other
Oh yeah, it was.
boroughs
I
in
mean,
New
it was.
Jersey, like trying to lure out Queens residents to dine and stuff like that?
No, I think at that point it was like your local barber shop, your local, really hyper local stuff.
Hmm. So how did the company start growing from there?
So my mom slowly started different editions and had a few newspapers. She started a health magazine. I graduated college in 2000. I was an investment banker. I joined the media and telecom group, and I joined my mom after 9/11. So I joined at the very end of 2001. And I think working together really helped us build a stronger foundation of a business, because my mom is really the best salesperson I've ever met, best networker I've ever met. But when you're running a business, sometimes the smaller the business, the harder it is, because it doesn't matter what has to be done, whether it's taking out the garbage, selling ads, or laying out the paper, you have to do it all. And we really started building a foundation, and really the impetus to our growth came when we were approached to sell our company. So what happened was that the New York Post decided that they were going to buy all of the family-owned community newspapers in the five boroughs of New York City. And my sister worked for News Corp, and we used to meet with the publisher of the Post. And he said at a lunch, we'd like to buy your company. And it was right after I had joined the business. I said, well, why? And he said, we want to own New York City, and we compete very much with the New York Daily News. We have a large readership in Manhattan, but we really want to expand that to the other boroughs in New York City. And we think by owning all the community media, we'll do that. So we'll buy all of them.
How many newspapers
And
did you own at this point?
at that point, maybe it was a half dozen.
Hmm. And
And
and was this feel like the growth of that half dozen, was that just purely taking profits and reinvesting and launching or new newspapers?
yeah, yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
who will take the back page? You will, great. We'll start another paper. That kind of
Uh,
mentality. Um, and I think that worked in the beginning for sure. But with the New York Post, they said to me, "Hey, Josh, we'll give you a long career. Vicky, my mom, will give you a year contract." And my mom said, "Get lost." She loves what she does. And they
yeah.
went around and they ended up buying many, if not most, of the community newspapers that were family owned at that time in New York City. I think what the Post came to realize pretty quickly is, people weren't going to come to their headquarters in Manhattan and take ads. They had to be really out in the community, engaged in the community, involved in the community, and they weren't willing to do that. And within probably 6 years, we ended up owning everything that they bought.
So you
And
bought
that,
it back from them?
yeah, everything that they bought, we ended up buying back. And
Uh-huh.
that propelled us to own a majority of the community media in the five boroughs of New York City.
Yeah, so like basically over in that period of time, you went from, a series of Queens newspapers to having newspapers in every borough, but you were also like nichifying within those boroughs, like, like going after specific ethnic communities. I saw that there's a gay newspaper. Like talk about that in terms of like how you were kind of hitting all those different niches and all those different, local areas.
Yeah, so between the time when we did not buy those papers yet. We were starting other media outlets, one being a Spanish language media outlet. We recognized that a quarter of the population in New York City was Hispanic or spoke Spanish as a second language or first language. And we started that newspaper very successfully, still around today as a weekly, expanded to Long Island as well as New York City. We bought a lot of media on Long Island during that time. But when we made that acquisition, we also got other markets, including the LGBTQ market, Gay City News serving New York City. It's really kind of been nationally recognized. Caribbean Life, which is the largest Caribbean American community media outlet in the nation. Obviously, there's a massive population here in New York City and Long Island for Caribbean Americans. So we really look to kind of expand our reach to as many communities as we possibly could. And
Yeah, and so the idea not just like basically that New York is like a city of diasporas from different countries, and like that diaspora, each diaspora needs its own kind of newspaper, right?
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think whenever you can speak to people in content that they're interested in, the more that you can develop that connection and relationship.
Yeah, and so obviously this is happening when the internet is starting to ramp up. More and more newspapers are kind of going online. What was that trend? Like my general sense, having come from local newspapers, is local newspapers were always behind the curve in terms of moving away from print and really embracing digital. In fact, if you look at their websites today, they're still like 10 years behind. What was your kind of experience like with that?
Well, listen, I joined my mom, in 2001 and, joined her maybe when I was 22. So I certainly understood that we had to evolve and develop a digital side of the business. And I think one of the best things that we did was from the very beginning, like when we owned Queens Media, I bought the domain QNS, short for Queens. And I did that purposely to change the domain from what the newspaper's name was, queenscourier.com, to send a message not only to the general public, but to our team internally that we are going to be a digital first media company. And I think that helped kind of culturally, internally with our organization, letting people understand that we're going to put stories online first when they're happening. And then I think the other part was I started building an email newsletter very early, and tried to acquire as much data as I could early. And that really helped, I think, develop really strong email newsletter business. But I have to say, as early as we invested in digital media, it took years to really develop revenue stream that I would say would be sustainable. And I would
Yeah.
even say maybe in the last just few years. So I think we invested in it early and we purposely invested in it saying we're going to have a digital editor. We don't know how we're going to make money, but we know how important it is to develop that reach and for people to recognize it. Listen, it's still a work in progress to this day, but I think we set that mindset early that we're going to be a digital first newsroom and think about digital and think about use of email newsletters. Um, so I think that's put us in a good position of where we are today. And then the other part of our business that we started many years ago, 30 years ago, was events. We produce an event every week, literally, so over 50 events a year. And we started those, 30 years ago. So those two divisions of our business, we definitely take seriously and have for many years, meaning digital and events.
So for the newspapers, did each newspaper have its own website, or did you like consolidate all the content from all the Queens newspapers into that QNS website?
Yeah, exactly. So
Uh-huh.
we have regional websites, but we would merge all the content for geographic areas into one domain.
Yeah.
But we still have dozens of websites because we just have either, different brands that don't make sense to combine or multiple geographies.
Yeah, and I've interviewed other people who did that. There's a guy who runs a company called Rough Draft Atlanta who runs a bunch of newspapers in Atlanta, but he consolidated all their content on like one website, even though it goes, it's also being published in all these different print newspapers with these different brands and stuff like that, which I think is a smart strategy when you have limited resources and you kind of need to consolidate some of that readership online.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
listen, I think even with resources, like I've always been a hyper local, that's a buzzword now, but we've always been hyper local. But I always believe that sometimes people look at it and say, well, I have to be for every neighborhood individually. And my argument around that is great, but what about the person that like works in a different neighborhood? Or what about the restaurant that opens, four neighborhoods down? So sometimes I think people look at hyperlocal and they think that every neighborhood has to have its own website or its own email newsletter or and I think that model is really hard because I think everybody can recognize that you want to be really good at what you do, and it's super hard to do it if you have you know, something that you have to do for every single neighborhood. Like, can it be amazing in every neighborhood? I think sometimes you'll see people get like great traction in one neighborhood and then they think, oh, it'll work for all these other neighborhoods. It doesn't. I haven't seen that happen yet. And we actually acquired a publisher of neighborhood specific sites. And, we kind of let them be for now to kind of learn a little bit, but really hard to get like extreme traction on multiple neighborhoods, even in one borough, let alone anybody that's thinking about it in a large geography, whether that's national or a bigger region.
was that site DNA Info?
No, no, DNA Info actually, he just shut that down.
Hmm.
It was neighborhood sites in Queens County called Queens Post, and they had an LIC post, Astoria Post, Sunnyside
Hmm.
Post, etc. So it was in our own geography, so it made sense. And the people that ran that now are two of our top editors. Um, so we're very fortunate to have a great team.
So what started happening to your local advertising with the rise of things like Craigslist, Yelp, Google local ads, Facebook targeted local ads and stuff like that? Like, how did you convince advertisers that, it was still worth like advertising in your newspapers?
Well, I think you have to recognize that advertisers are smart, and at the end of the day, they want return on investment. And I think, we've worked really hard to figure out how to do that for clients. And I'm a big believer of having multiple channels and being able to offer an opportunity for a client to reach readers on a lot of different platforms. So whether that's, our website, our email newsletter, our social channels, our newspapers, or our events. And I think by putting that all together, we provide people with really strong return on investment. And, I think also you have to have scale. I don't care what anybody says with local, it's very difficult to have one local media outlet and be able to have that sustain itself financially. And whether that's when I say one, whether that's, one newspaper or one region or, one vertical, unless it's reaching, an amazing audience or a very large audience. It's really tough to do that without having, infrastructure that could be used across a company.
So that you can like sell ads across boroughs and localities and stuff like that. So you could sell them at this extreme local level, but then also like to like larger regional advertisers as well.
Well, that also, but also just containing your costs. Whether you have one media outlet, five media outlets, how many CFOs or, bookkeepers do you need? So I think things like that are really critical to keep, your costs down, especially in print. Because we still print today, probably 600,000 print papers a week. So, that's a huge cost to us. And, you have to be able to run very efficiently to still make that work.
And so tell me about your event strategy. What kind of events are you putting on?
So, again, that really started very organically. My mom went to an event and they weren't honoring any women, and she started a women event. That women event grew, and now we host like seven or eight of those a year throughout different regions that we're in. which is New York City, Long Island, Philadelphia, and Palm Beach, Florida. And those events have really developed into, anywhere from 300 to 900 people per event attending those. We have these power lists where we bring together the most powerful group of people. We do them for verticals, including LGBTQ people of Caribbean American descent. We do them for a healthcare category. That's one of our biggest categories. We do a lot around health and wellness for consumers. We own a family brand, so we do a lot of camp events and a lot of family events. We also do a lot of like celebrations. We own Dan's Papers in the Hamptons, which is kind of like a international destination for the rich and famous during the summer, and we host very high-end food and wine and cocktail events. So really all different types of events.
Are they like conferences? Are they just like socializing events? Are they awards shows? Like what are they?
All of the above. All of
Uh-huh.
the above. So we do conferences where it's, on very specific topics. We do these large awards programs. And then we do parties, like really big ticketed, events with big sponsors. And then we do like these B2C events where it's like come and learn about, the camps that your kids may want to go to. So it's
What
really
are
turned into a whole, division of our company.
what are the when you say parties, what does that mean?
Listen, if you want to have a lot of fun, we know how to throw great fun. So, for instance, on Memorial Day weekend, Dan's Papers hosts the Rosé Soiree, presented by Wilmington Trust, I might add, which is, you'll come to this party, you'll be able to taste rosés from all over the world, some local rosés and some rosés from France and everywhere else you could imagine. We'll have some of the top chefs preparing bites for people to have. We'll have live music. We'll have, entertainment on stilts and dancers. We'll have an after party. So, they're real kind of events that
It's
attract,
like a
a great audience.
festival, kind of.
Almost, yeah,
Like
yeah.
almost
But
like
we
a
keep it
wine
a little bit
festival.
higher end than a festival
Uh-huh.
because of the market that they're in, which is the Hamptons.
And you're monetizing that through tickets and sponsorships.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And as you know, you said that like it's been slow to move, like to actually drive like digital revenue, and only in the last few years has it been sustainable. What kind of ad products are you like offering? Like, is this like standard display advertising? Is it native advertising? What are the different
Yeah.
things that you're selling?
Yeah, listen, that's a good question. I think we're all still trying to figure it out. But I have to say that right now, I wouldn't say we're in one of the scariest periods for digital media, but I think we're going to have a lot of challenges ahead. I think that the whole era of banner and tile ads isn't dead, but I don't know that, they're going to provide the return on investment for clients that you can justify, A, because they can buy them really cheaply and effectively through third parties. And B, I don't click on them. I don't know who really does anymore. And I think, the more sophisticated the clients and or agencies, they totally know that. And, you know, one of the things that I think we can offer that no one else, especially hopefully AI, can't figure out well enough is to be able to write compelling content for our clients, sponsored content that can be published in print, online, through our email newsletters, and on social. I think that that's one of the places and areas that we focus on because we do it well and we can track results. And if it's written in a compelling way, it works very effectively. So I think that that's a big part of, our digital strategy. But I tend to think that we're going to have to even think more outside, the box on digital going forward and think about, other ways of being able to drive digital revenue.
Yeah, like I see a lot of local publishers with native ads, even more so than like national publications, because that's something you can do to differentiate yourself from like Google or Facebook and be like, this is an article that's going to permanently live on our site. People will still discover it for years. You get to see it next to the editorial content of this website you read every day. And like, it seems like local businesses see some differentiated value in that versus what they can find on, advertising on every other kind of local or website
Yeah,
or
but I
like
think it
social media.
only, yeah, but I think it only works in two ways. One is you have to have like a really strong and engaged audience. And two is it's got to be written really well. Because if you just put stuff up, who cares? No one's going to
Mhm.
read it.
Yeah. So you have
So
like a team that does that, or is it like your journalists who are creating the editorial content
no,
are also
we have a team now that does that because you have to think about keywords, you have to think about links, you have to think about, you know, pulling the nugget of information that's going to be, compelling to our readership. You have to think about the tone of voice, so it's not so different from, our existing sites.
Do you use any programmatic advertising or anything like that, or is it all direct sold?
I think we've eliminated almost all the programmatic.
And why is that?
You know what? It's counting pennies, and I think even a bigger part is almost like it can be a crutch that you like lean on and be like, well, the inventory is taken care of. No, like what is our available inventory and let's
Yeah.
get it sold ourselves. And is it really worth it? Is it really, compelling for our readers? It's so random. It's not, feeding them local ads that maybe they would be more interested in, and also it's like drawing a line. Are we going to accept pennies anymore? Like, I think we're worth more than that. So I think that
Um,
that is really like the defining, reason. It's hard when you have some sites that have a lot of traffic because it's like, oh, that money actually, can add up when you, especially when you have really strong traffic in a given time period.
and like, how do you approach ad sales? Like, do you have ad people who live in each of the neighborhoods who are actually like showing up at the doorstep of these businesses?
We used to do that a lot. I would say that since COVID, that's really changed a lot. And I think really it's just a factor of people being more willing to do business over email and over the phone from COVID. And I think also it's like, listen, I love small business. Don't get me wrong. It's a core fundamental part of our business. But I think it's really the larger institutional advertising that brings in the bigger dollars and the real difference between being profitable and not being profitable. It's very hard to be profitable just getting ads from mom and pops. No matter what you are, it's really hard.
When you say large institutional, do you mean like the Fortune 100 companies or like kind of larger regional
Yeah, no, it's funny, right? Yeah, that's how local I am. I'm thinking, I think, when I say regional, I'm talking about banks, hospitals, things of that nature. Those are the clients that, will think bigger about their marketing and have bigger budgets.
So you mentioned that you have, publications in Philly and Palm Springs. When did you decide to like kind of get out of the New York market and what has the strategy been there? Like how do you choose which markets to move into?
Yeah, so initially, what happened, I mean, we made a lot of acquisitions over somewhat of a short period of time because right before COVID, we acquired AM New York, which was the largest circulated daily newspaper in the country, and has exclusive distribution in New York City's metro, meaning if you go to the subway, there's a rack and our papers are there. When we bought that, there was a competitor, Metro, and Metro is very well known in Europe and around the world. It happened to be that the CEO of, I guess, Metro International got the exclusive rights to use Metro in the United States. And when we bought AM New York, they approached us and said, listen, we don't want to compete. Either you buy us or we buy you. I was like, well, we'll buy you. And I was like, all right, we also had to take the Philadelphia market because they were in Philadelphia and Boston.
Okay.
So we did not. They closed Boston before we ended up buying the company, but we ended up keeping Philadelphia. So that kind of happened through that transaction. We merged Metro and AM New York in New York City, but we kept Metro Philadelphia in Philadelphia. So that expansion kind of happened through that process. And then what we did is we kind of look at all of our business, but with Dan's papers, that the media outlet I was telling you that throws the parties in the Hamptons is a cyclical market. meaning, people are out there during the summer and it's packed during the summer. Yet during the winter, a lot of those people that own homes or rent homes are not there. So the business would get tremendous amount of business for like 4 months out of the year. And we started thinking about what we could do to be able to, not have it so cyclical. And we expanded it to Palm Beach, Florida, because what we recognized was the top 1% of the Hamptons, meaning the wealthiest of the wealthiest, spent their winters in Palm Beach, Florida. And we started as a monthly about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's been very successful ever since. And then we also expanded into New York City. So we took that brand and we create a monthly product using that brand with localized content in Palm Beach, Florida, and in Manhattan. And basically it's kind of, we call it that triangle of wealth, which is Manhattan, the Hamptons, and Palm Beach. So now we're reaching this, top 1% wherever they are throughout the entire year.
And is the Palm Beach publication, is that a print publication or is it online
Oh, it's
only?
print. Yeah, print.
Uh-huh.
And very
Interesting.
successful.
Uh-huh.
It's an
And like
interesting format. It's a news magazine, I call it, because it has coded stock on the outside, newsprint, and then coded stock in the middle.
for the Philadelphia publication, is it still just that publication, or if you started to branch out at all, like beyond that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we definitely do digital, metrophiladelphia.com. We bought a sports website called Philly Sports Network because, people are crazy about their sports in Philadelphia. So we cover all the professional sports teams.
Did the guy
Uh,
who ran that was his name Kyle? Does that ring a bell?
no, that was a different website.
Okay. All right. I wanted I
Crossing
like
Broad, I believe, was Kyle's site.
okay. All right. Keep on going. Sorry. It's just
No, no,
another
all
conversation
good.
with another person I had.
Yeah, but there
Yeah.
are several sports sites in Philadelphia. It's very interesting, actually. It's an
Yeah.
interesting market because
Hmm.
there might be a half a dozen sports called blogs in Philadelphia, but that's how much people love their sports there.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do any like digital content other than like written content? Do you do podcasts? Do you do video or anything like that?
Yeah, we certainly do podcasts. I have my own podcast every week. It's focused on, leaders typically in New York City, extends to Long Island. We have a podcast for Gay City News. My mom has her own podcast. We have access to people, which is great, in our given market. So, they make for interesting conversations. We produce podcasts for clients, which is, something that we do. And we do video, but most of it lives on social. Most of it is social first video that we're creating.
And the podcasts you're doing, are you like monetizing that directly, or is that how is that fit into the business?
We haven't figured out how to monetize those yet.
Hmm. So it's just a way to kind of like spread your brand and influence and stuff like that
A
on the
hundred
to
percent.
yeah. Yeah, I've found very few publishers that have figured out how to like directly monetize local podcasts because it just seems like same thing with like video in a lot of ways is it's just like for some reason the market just hasn't matured to where local advertisers really even know how to understand the value of a podcast ad, even though that they're already, advertising on local radio.
100%. Listen, if you don't enjoy doing it, don't bother.
Yeah.
If you want to have some fun and do a podcast and get to talk to people, it's fantastic. And people will listen and react to it, but it's hard to monetize because, I mean, how many podcasts are out there? Hundreds of thousands.
Approximately how many people work for your company?
I would say about 250 people.
Uh-huh. So that's a pretty large company. And like what services are centralized versus what is done at the individual publications? Like
I mean, I would
is
say,
your marketing team centralized? Is your sale like what are the different things that are
yeah, I would
centralized?
say that everything is centralized except for the journalists and the sales team,
Hmm. The
but
journalists and the
everything
sales
else is
team.
centralized.
So the sales teams do have like their kind of individual fiefdoms that they and locations that they target individually.
Yeah, listen, I think, you talked a little bit about do people still go door to door? I mean, I still don't think you can underestimate understanding your community. And also, listen, I always say if there's one time a business is ready to market themselves, should be when they have their grand opening. So the best way to be aware of a grand opening is to drive around. So I still think that there's tremendous value, having salespeople that are out there and engaged in the community. Sometimes better just attending events, than going door to door per se. But they
And
still
then
have to be there.
yeah, and of that 250 people, like what percentage of them are like working in editorial, like what you would consider journalists or editors?
I mean, off the top of my head, I'd probably say 50, 60.
Uh-huh. And are they like what kind of journalism? Is it like civic journalism? Is it a lot of business journalism? What like how are you kind of thinking journalistically like your role in a community? Like are you going to like local council meetings and obviously I don't know what all the different kind of governing bodies are in New York, but like board of supervisors, school board, whatever the equivalent of that is in New York.
All of the above, literally all of
Mhm.
the above. The one thing that I feel like I'm trying to beat the drum on and have a mantra of is don't tell me a story about something that already happened, right? I think
Mhm.
that's one of the things that a lot of newsrooms are going to have to think about, meaning there's a fire,
Mhm.
right? Every local place probably wants to talk about the fire. The problem is AI, and I think in a very short period of time, will be able to tell that fire story better than we can, right? Because it's going to take every single video that somebody has of that fire, every single piece of content that's out there about that fire, and be able to deliver it to people. What AI won't be able to do is talk about the family that lost a loved one in that fire and or the business that was there for 50 years and or where the family is going to end up living after that fire. So that's the way I think I'm trying to really focus our newsroom to think about. It's not that that's drastic, but it is thinking about every story individually of how we can do it differently. So that way it's a unique proposition that we're offering people to come to our site. Because I think AI is moving at the speed where, it's going to be able to tell you pretty well, here's a summary of content that you're interested in.
How much
And
time?
we
Oh,
do
sorry.
well.
Well, how much time do you think about like journalistic impact, which is kind of intangible and can't always directly be tied, to the success of the business, but the classic, we got a official to resign or we got this business to close down or to reform itself or we exposed this kind of, bad thing that was happening. Like how much do you think about that and like how important is that to you?
I mean, I'm not about like the gotcha stuff at all.
Hmm.
Listen, if that happens, it happens. But I think, we can't forget that content is the driver of the business and that we have to keep thinking differently. And I think, nobody has the game plan besides the big boys, what I call the big boys, like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, other select media outlets in terms of how to have a sustainable growing business in media. So I think, I'm involved to the extent that I want us to think differently and really think as a digital first organization and, make sure that we are covering things that our readers are interested in. Also, like, let's look at data. Data can tell us a lot. So we have access to a lot of data and how do we, use that to make better judgments of the use of our time? Because I think every media organization can say, you don't have enough bandwidth. You always want more journalists.
So when you look ahead like 5 years from now, what would you like the company to be doing or and what kind of different place would you like it to be that it isn't in today? Like would you want to be monetizing with like I know you don't really do subscriptions very much or anything like that. Like would you want to go into that? Do you want to expand more regionally into like Philadelphia or Florida? Like what are the different things you're hoping to do that you're not doing now?
I think we're always looking to expand because I don't know, I'm a believer, especially in media, if you don't grow, you die. So I think we're always, looking for opportunities to grow the business. I think one of my priorities is to develop stronger ties to our readers. Now, whatever that means, whatever way you look at it, but if it's somebody picking up our paper, if it's somebody visiting our website, if it's somebody subscribing to our email, if it's getting social followers, if it's getting podcast listeners, how do we get more engagement and more eyeballs? So I think that that is my biggest focus, now and into the future is growing the audience and growing our engagement and those people that like are our most loyal, consumers of our content.
Okay, Josh, those were all the questions I have for you. Where can people find you online?
Schnepsmedia.com. Also, I love LinkedIn, so definitely can look me up there as well.
All right, well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Pleasure, Simon. Thanks for the opportunity.